Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown. This is Nick Catman with the FDA Group. Before we jump into our discussion for today, just a little bit about the FDA Group. We help life science companies in the areas of quality assurance, regulatory affairs, clinical operations, commissioning, qualification, and validation, as well as manufacturing and engineering. We offer 3 different engagement models: consulting, staff augmentation, and full-time employee recruitment. So if you ever find yourself in need, just head over to the fdagroup.com and check us out. And today I am speaking with David Marlin. Hey, David.
Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Thanks for hopping on.
My pleasure.
Okay. So we'll jump right into it. We're going to be talking about leadership and management. Before we actually get into that topic, could you introduce yourself and the company?
Yeah, sure. My name is David Marlin. I am the CEO of MetaComet Systems. We're based in Western Massachusetts. We provide royalty automation software for companies that need to pay out royalties. So the most obvious example is book publishing. So anytime a publisher publishes a book, they have to pay royalties to all the authors, and it can become a really complex process, and we just automate that whole process. And we work with some other industries as well, like video games. We actually even have one life sciences company.
Well, considering this audience, I thought it would be good for you to highlight that you do some work in life sciences. Anything unique about the life sciences space compared to book publishing or video games?
You know, some of the rules that we experience in life sciences are a little unique, but we've like in particular, sometimes royalties that we've seen are based off of other people's royalties, which is a little different than what we usually see. But we've managed to compensate for that, and so it actually works really smoothly in our system now.
Okay, very cool. So can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to this stage in your career?
Yeah, so I think like perhaps many of us, it was pretty accidental. So immediately after I graduated from college, the only thing I knew was that I wanted to ski. So I moved out to Aspen, Colorado for 2 years to be a ski bum. Then I, of course, had to get a real life. So I flirted with the idea of medical school for a while. That was clearly not the right decision. So I actually decided to get into software. I've always loved software. When I was a kid, I taught myself how to program on an old Texas Instruments TI-99 4A. So you probably have to be in your late 40s or 50s to appreciate what that is. But it was this great one of the original home computers. So I got really into that. I totally fell in love with software. I studied some computer science in college, and then I actually got my first job in software at a medical software company in Boston that was called IDX Systems. They were eventually bought out by GE. So I did that for a period of time. Then I decided to go to business school to get an MBA, thinking long term, I'd love to be able to run my own software company, and this would be a good next step for that. Um, and so I did that. And immediately after I graduated, I actually was recruited by American Express. And so I did marketing for them for a few years. Um, that large corporate environment, American Express was a great company to work for, but that large corporate environment, I realized was not for me. So I actually decided to get back into software at that point. I became a software consultant. And one of my clients came to me with that idea for a new product, and that's how MetaComet got started. And so it was a one-man show. It's been a long grind, but after about 23 years now, we now have about 20 employees and about close to 200 customers.
Very cool. So now that you've got 20 employees, obviously, you have to lead them and manage them. So what does leadership and management mean to you?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a question I've been actually wrestling with a lot recently. So To me, leadership means guiding a group of people towards a common goal. Um, and for me, it means having the courage to ask these people to follow you down that path, and inspiring those people, coaching those people, teaching those people, and also learning from them, being open to new ideas. Yeah.
Okay. Um, what would you say is the most challenging part of that? And what part of that do you feel that you are comfortable with and maybe not excel at, but are capable of?
So I think for me, the most challenging part of that is the courage and confidence aspect of it. You need people to follow. You need people to buy into a vision for your company, and just having the confidence that people will, if you put them in the right environment. I think confidence has always been something I've personally struggled with, and so that part's been a challenge for me, and not operating out of fear, as a result of that confidence. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I've faced in being a leader, and also I think the other big challenge I faced was getting coaching and mentoring and training to become a leader, because I really did not know what I was doing when I first started. I was very naive. As you and I have spoken about before, I learned a tremendous amount in business school, but I didn't learn anything about how to lead. That was never a topic that was covered in my program. So it's all stuff that I've kind of had to figure out on my own.
Mhm. What would you say are some of the strategies, tactics, tricks, tips that you've recently learned that you've been able to apply to your ability to lead?
So I think one is definitely engaging with a group of peers. So I recently joined Vistage, which is designed for groups of CEOs to collaborate, and which is how you and I know each other. And I think that's been a huge development for me. Just having that peer group, because it really is, as they say, lonely at the top. You can't really, you don't necessarily know that you're getting the guidance and feedback you need from the people that work for you. So having that group of peers to share and bounce ideas off of and to learn from has been huge. And as a result of that, I've been introduced to a lot of great um, ideas and concepts. Like one for me is this idea of vulnerability, and how, in order to create trust in an organization, you really need to be vulnerable, and you need to encourage others to be vulnerable, and to realize that you don't have all the answers. And another thing that I've learned is really to to trust people, to trust the people that I've hired. Because having started this, I started this as a one-man show. I did everything, and I thought I was the expert at everything. And so as I started to hand things off to other people, to trust them to 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 do the work without me hovering over them and micromanaging them. And you and I have talked a lot about, for instance, the entrepreneurial operating system, which gives you kind of a framework for an organization, and also a framework for being a leader. And that's been a really powerful tool for me. I think the biggest thing I've struggled with is one of the concepts that they present, and I actually have you to thank for this, because you initially told me to read that book, Traction, and get involved and look at EOS. Um, is is this concept of letting go of the vine. Like trusting. It's basically trusting other people to do the work that needs to get done. And what I've discovered is that these other people, despite how I always thought otherwise, they actually know a lot more than I do. Like our lead developer is a much better developer than I'll ever be. Our lead support person is a much better support person than I'll ever be. So trusting these people and empowering these people to uh, to really own that part of the business has been a huge leap for me. It's been a huge awakening, I think, and it's been relatively recent that I've really found myself able to just let go and trust these people to do the work. And things go wrong, and in some ways that's important because you kind of only learn in some ways from failures, and so you have to be willing to let people make mistakes, because Lord knows I certainly make tons of mistakes. So you have to be open to letting other people make mistakes. And the key to that is making sure that they learn from those mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, since you've quote unquote let go of the vine, what are some of the benefits that you've seen since then? And are there, outside of people making human errors, are there any drawbacks to letting go of the vine?
Um, that's a really interesting and important question. So the benefits I see are just much less stress for myself. That's one of the big benefits. Like I used to have everything in my head. I had to know everything that was going on. And as I've let go of the vine, I've learned to trust others in the organization more and realize that they are competent and they're going to get the stuff done that needs to get done. So that's been one of the benefits. And I think another benefit is these people are better at doing these different aspects of the business than I would be. And so we're doing things better now. Like a good example is in our customer support area. Like we recently hired a new director of customer support, customer success, we actually call it. And um, what this person is doing is fantastic. I mean, he's implemented all these processes and tools that has enabled us to really, especially as we've scaled up, to really continue to provide the high level of customer service that we need to. And I never would have been able, I wouldn't have had the experience or understanding to do that. I hired someone that had that experience and understanding. So that's been a huge benefit. In terms of the downsides of letting go of the vine, um, you know, I'm not really, nothing's really coming to my head at this point. It's mostly been a positive experience. I mean, people are, a lot of times people make little mistakes that I probably wouldn't have made just because I'm so familiar with the area. But overall, I would be making a lot more mistakes than they're making in other aspects of it. So I think I don't really see much in the way of negatives of letting go of the vine. It's overall been a huge positive to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, the cool thing about Vistage and EOS and, you know, engaging in leadership and management is it's a space that you constantly are learning. And as soon as you think you've figured it all out, everything changes, right? So there's no stopping. But
Yes.
if you look at kind of your history as a leader and manager, and you kind of look back, what's something that you did or some philosophy that you've embraced that you're most proud of?
Well, so I think um, oh, yeah, that's a really Another great question. So certainly listening, becoming a better listener. Um, I've kind of always been a talker. I've been one of those kind of like charismatic type leaders that kind of tends to push my opinions onto everybody. And
Mm.
it's funny, I just reread that book Good to Great, which is a classic, which I think everybody should read. It's actually homework for EOS, which is why I read it. So and they talk there about the data that they uncovered shows that these charismatic leaders are in general not as successful as the sort of more humble leaders, the ones that are better at being listeners and engaging their team. And so I think that that's one of the most it's something I'm always going to need to work on because I'm just a kind of a talkative person by nature, I think.
Mm.
Um, but and so it's been hard for me, but I'm definitely getting better at it. Um, and and in fact, I now really, we had our weekly leadership meeting yesterday, and it's just, every time I keep reminding myself, keep your mouth shut, keep your mouth shut, keep your mouth shut, and it's just awesome seeing the rest of the team identify problems, solve problems, and every time I open my mouth now, I find that I'm just kind of pushing us away from the direction we should be going. So that's been a really important lesson, something that I'm pretty proud of. In terms of other things that I'm proud of about our company I'm really excited about the software that we've created. We rewrote our software from the ground up. It was a huge process. We had some big failures along the way. Um, but now we have a truly outstanding set of tools, and our customers really love it. And it's so awesome to see the efficiency that we're able to bring to them. They're like, we had this one customer the other day, and this is the kind of thing that makes me really most excited and proud of what we've done is, we had a customer, because usually, most of our customers, they spend, I don't know, weeks every quarter, if not full time, dealing with this challenge of paying out royalties. A lot of them are, have a whole team of full time people dealing with their royalties, and we've been able to get it so that they can just have like one part time person manage their royalties for them. And they're blown away the first time they send out their royalty statements because all they have to do is really just, push a button and the royalty statements just go out. They don't have to put them together. They don't have to individually send out emails. It's just, everything's, we can get everything all integrated with their other systems. So they basically just have to push a button and the royalty statements go out. And it's so, I think the thing I'm most proud of is the excitement I see when people first realize all they have to do is push a button to get their royalty sent out, because it means that that we've done, that our product is a success, and it's the software, and the software is really what, that's my passion. I just love software. So seeing the software that we've built do that is really neat.
Yeah, well, there obviously was a problem, and
Yes.
your software was able to fix it. And our purpose as a company here is to enhance people's quality of life. And I get a burst of energy every time I speak to somebody that's been using our services, and just hearing how their life is better. There's less stress. There's a level of trust and credibility that they can let go of the vine when they give us something to do. It doesn't mean that there's no oversight, but there's a level of trust, and that definitely takes a lot of weight off their shoulders. So I
Mm-hmm.
hear that. Um, and just to kind of stay in line with this concept of education, you mentioned Good to Great. That's obviously a book that everybody's read. I joke around a lot because I read the book, and the concepts are great, sometimes it's hard to hear how good Radio Shack and Fannie Mae are.
Right.
Yeah, that's a little tough to. It's a bitter pill to swallow. But I think he came out with a new version, and maybe
Mhm,
are identical. But at the end of the day, just because they were great doesn't mean they stayed great, I guess is kind of the
mhm,
idea. They went from good to great, and then sat on their laurels or whatever the
mhm.
case may be, and then obviously things took place. What are some of the other books that you would recommend leaders and managers read?
Well, one that you recommended to me was Traction, by Gino Wickman, and to me that was a real eye-opening book, and it just helped me understand the 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 kind of structure I needed to put around my business. And there's a very similar book that I'd actually read before that called Scaling Up, which I think is also really valuable. Really, they basically tell you the same thing. They just have different ways of telling it. Ultimately, I think if you're going to pick one, I think Traction's the better book. Um, Another book that's been really influential, I'm thinking kind of like the all-time classics, is the Seven Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey. um that book is the one that got me into daily planning, for instance. Like every morning I wake up and the first thing I do is plan out my day, and then every Friday the last thing I do is plan out my next week. And just that one tip alone, I think, is has been huge. A couple other books that have really had an impact on me, one is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a fun read. It's a really easy read. It's told as sort of a fictional story, um, and that really opened my eyes to the idea of being vulnerable, the importance of vulnerability in establishing trust, and how important it is to establish trust within your leadership team and within your whole company, in order to make progress. And actually, a another book that's also told as like a fictional book that was really useful to me is it's called The Goal. It's really about sort of optimizing your operations. Um, I recently finished a book which has had a profound impact on me, called Leadership and Self-Deception. It's by the Arbinger Institute. Um, and the book basically starts, again, it's told as a fictional story. It's interesting.
Hmm.
Some of those are the best books, but the the protagonist walks into his boss's office, and his boss, after just a month from the job, and his boss says, "You have a problem." And so just like it's just like, wow, that's kind of harsh thing to say to a guy that you just hired. But then he says, I have that same problem. We all have that same problem. And it's this idea of looking at people as people
Hmm.
instead of as objects. And there's basically two uh, symptoms that you become very aware of. I've become very aware of ever since I read the book, that are telling me, oh wow, I'm treating that person as an object. And those are, whenever you find yourself blaming someone, or whenever you find yourself coming up with justifications for your actions. And I'm finding it to be really true. And I've become, it's amazing, just since reading that book, I've become hyper conscious every time I find myself blaming someone or justifying why I'm doing something. And that's usually a symptom that you're in a state of self-deception. So I would
Hmm.
really recommend that. So those are some of my favorite books on the subject of leadership.
Hmm. Yeah, the idea of blaming, I definitely hear. I got that from a different book, Extreme Ownership with Jocko Willink, or by Jocko
Mm.
Willink, and that's also a very fun read because he has different principles, and each principle starts off with a war story because he was a Navy SEAL, and
Oh wow.
then he takes that principle from the war story and applies it to business, in a real world situation, and then he kind of recaps what the principle is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole concept of the book is everything is your fault, good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to take all the glory when things go well. You want to, lift up your team. But the concept of everything is your fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even in the most extreme example, if my wife goes to CVS and ends up getting robbed, that's my fault because I didn't, research the area and educate her on, the crime in that area, or what time did she go out? Was it at nighttime when it's more dangerous, or did she have protection? Was she trained, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even in the most extreme examples, I think knowing that you're in complete control, even in the face of adversity that makes it seem like you're not in control, even with all the regulations we have to deal with, that's solely an obstacle for us to, get what we need to get done. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, so and then the other thing you mentioned, it was justifying your actions. Was that it?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
now I'm really sad to hear that because my legs are sore from the gym yesterday, and I was really looking forward to saying, "Oh, I'm not going to go today. I need a rest." But obviously, after this conversation, I'm not going to be able to do that. But what do you think are some of the justifications that a leader, a manager, different leaders and managers might all experience?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Maybe like uh, justifying why I don't need to get back to a troublesome customer or vendor. Uh, Justifying my ignoring somebody. Um, it's like, oh, I'm going to ignore him because he's been ignoring me. He he didn't do what I asked him to, so I'm just gonna do this thing that will make them have some kind of an implication for them. So I find myself, ever since I read that book, I find myself aware that I'm so many things I'm justifying. I'm like coming up with an excuse as to why it's okay for me to behave this way that I know deep down is not really
Hmm.
okay.
So it sounds like being self-aware that you should not deviate from your principles is kind of what
Yeah,
I'm hearing.
yeah. It's like when you feel when there's an opportunity to treat someone nice. This is the way the book kind of describes it a little bit, or do something that you feel you should do, but you don't do it, and you start
Mm,
justifying why you're not doing it. Like that guy who wants to cut you off on the road and get into that little space in heavy traffic. Um, you're like, well, I've been waiting in this line. I'm not going to let him in. I'm justifying why I'm not going to let him in. But there's an opportunity for you to do something nice and let the guy just, maybe he's in a hurry. Maybe his wife's in the hospital. You just don't know, and so you're justifying that, and then that creates this tension, and it creates this like vortex of tension, because when you don't let that person cut you, then they're going to get all stressed out, and they're going to
mm,
start getting pissed off at you, and then they might do something obnoxious, and you're going to get more pissed off. So it creates this like vortex of tension,
mm.
that doesn't lead to anything positive.
Yeah, and conversely, doing something nice for somebody will lift their spirits, and then, it increases the possibility that they'll do something nice for someone else. So it's a yin
Exactly,
and a
and you can,
yang.
yeah, you can create this vortex of positivity on the flip side. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing you kind of hinted at, which I think is really important, is and it really takes us to be conscious to think about this, is in our world, in our head, we're always dealing with different problems, right? And our emotions are always moving, right? I've
Hmm.
got family issues, I've got weight issues, I've got health issues, I've got financial issues, I've got relationship issues, and there's all of these different things, and sometimes they come one at a time, sometimes they come all at once, sometimes they're small problems, sometimes they're really big problems. Now, how often have we looked at a person and just completely overlooked the idea that they're probably dealing with something,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
just having this default belief that everything's fine with everybody, and the
Mm-hmm.
reality is that nobody is. I mean, even when we are fine, there's always something wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I think to your point, I think as leaders and managers, it's really important for us to understand that at any given moment, somebody is dealing with something, and
Mm-hmm.
their interacting with you is going to have some sort of effect, as
Mm-hmm.
because we're leaders and managers. Doesn't it maybe it's not overwhelming, maybe it's very impactful, but it certainly is going to have, it's one piece of the greater puzzle that's going to impact their mood and their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting to recognize.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And as you mentioned before, you talked before about, constantly learning. I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to constantly learn, because you have to keep reminding yourself about these good practices. You have to keep because if you just kind of, okay, I got it, and you stop sharpening the saw, as Stephen Covey says in his Seven Habits, um, then that stuff starts to fade. So you got to
Mhm.
keep reminding yourself about these
Yeah.
positive habits.
I have the way I look at it in my own head is the gym, right? So
Hmm.
let's say I'm going to the gym and I got my bench press to 225, right? And that was my
Wow.
goal, and I'm not saying I did that. I'm just saying for somebody that can do 225, they got it, right? They hit
Yeah,
that goal.
yeah,
But to think that, okay, I did it and now I'm done, you're going to start to atrophy. And
right.
so once you hit your goal, it's increasingly more important that you continue to develop.
Hmm.
So, and that might actually be a good transition toward the end of this call, which is, for anybody that's continued to listen up to this point, if you could give them one piece of advice that you think is the most important piece that they can take away from this, what would that be?
Um, so one piece of advice, I think, I think it would be to, if you're a leader, as I mentioned earlier, it really is lonely at the top, and people don't always give you the feedback that you need to hear. And so I think it's really important to find peers of other leaders, like Vistage. I recently joined Vistage, and that's just been huge for me. Just being, just not only sharing my problems, but just hearing the challenges that other people are facing, and being able to share with each other, because it's a, we're kind of a unique group, and we don't have a lot of peers out there in the world that do what we do. And so having a group of peers, and I think similar to that is mentors, that can help guide you through some of these challenges. So just having people who kind of appreciate, because in some ways all businesses are the same. That's one of the concepts of traction. And so just having um, other people that you can, other leaders that you can share challenges with and bounce ideas off of. I that's something I wish I had done sooner. And so I think that would be my one piece of advice, is find some peers.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I agree with that. The thing that I found, which you obviously have found also, is prior to finding a group of like-minded individuals, I internalized everything,
Hmm.
right? And I was wrong in my belief that the different issues that I was experiencing was unique to me because I'm uniquely bad at whatever I'm doing. And of course, nobody else is having to go through any of these struggles because I'm an idiot, right? So, like you said, you go to the group and you hear somebody's struggling with the same things you are, and there's a misery loves company, and just there is a level of comfort in knowing that you're not uniquely stupid. And
Absolutely.
there's other people that are having to deal with the same type of crap that you're going through, and because of that, they have the experience on how to overcome, those situations that you thought was unique to you. So very cool. Well, David, this was awesome. I hope anybody listening got a lot out of this. And as always, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. If you haven't already, subscribe to get updates of new episodes at thefdagroup.com/podcast and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect about project or resource needs, head over to thefdagroup.com and get in touch, or feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day.